Okay. So there's a lot of outspoken knuckleheads on YouTube that down downplay or act like the Adventist interpretation of Daniel 8 is so crazy and faulty. And they say the time of the end was referring to Antiochus Epiphanes before Jesus was even born somehow, even though the figure in Daniel 8 has the same attributes as the little horn in Daniel 7, and he's called the little horn in Daniel 8. And that figure has attributes in Daniel 11, both the little horns in chapter 7 and chapter 8 are in the one figure in Daniel 11. So the figure in Daniel 11 is at least the figure in Daniel 8. But the problem is the little horn in Daniel 7 has attributes of the little horn in Daniel 8. And the attributes of the figure in Daniel 7 is seen in the attributes of Daniel 11. And everybody who thinks Daniel 8 is Antiochus Epiphanes sees that he has the same attributes as the one in Daniel 11. So how are we going to disconnect that? Not to mention the end of chapter 11 in Daniel speaks of all these activities of this figure who's identified at least as a type of the Antichrist, but it's really the Antichrist, period. And it says, at that time, Michael shall stand up, and there'll be a time of trouble since there never was from the beginning of the world. And at that time, and then you have the resurrection from the dead. Now, unless you're a preterist and you deny a physical resurrection from the dead, which is a damnable heresy, according to everybody, how does that work? And then you have this little problem where if the abomination of desolation, if you're not a futurist, say you're an amillennialist, and futurism is obviously false because Daniel's 70th week was fulfilled by Jesus. What about this abomination of desolation in the temple that Jesus talked about or Paul talked about? Do you think the temple's going to come back? And if you don't, then what is it talking about? Because the man of sin who will be revealed before the day of the Lord, there has to be a falling away first. What's the falling away? Amillennialist, non-futurist, Adventist denier. Let no one deceive you by any means, for that day will not come until a falling away comes first. All the Protestant reformers seem to recognize this as the papacy, which is a continuation, which there's only one group that saw the continuity of the covenants and that Daniel was speaking of the new covenant. If the reformers all believe that this was speaking of the papacy, what does that suggest? What is the temple of God showing him? Who sat in the temple of God showing himself that he is God? And if you recognize and understand that it is the Roman Church, because it's just a flow through from the four kingdoms and then the papal Rome becoming papal Rome, which screams out for a day for a year interpretation of the time prophecies, considering they can't be taken literally. What's the temple of God that he sits in? And once you admit that it's Rome, as you should, because it's one of the legs of the Protestant Reformation, then you have to admit Daniel 8 shifts into the new covenant. And once you admit Daniel 8 is talking about a period into the new covenant, because it's pointing out Rome as the Antichrist, you've just admitted that Daniel stretches into the new covenant period. And once you've done that, and you realize a day for your prophecy fits that to stretch into that period, and the 2300 days has the same starting point as the 70 weeks, which are a day for a year. So if you're criticizing the Adventist interpretation, I demand you to say what this is, and if you're going to deny your Protestant roots. And by the way, there's this thing people like to bring up, this idea of plagiarism with Ellen White. Let me I have my own liberal complaint here. If you make your name sola scriptura, justify for me how it is that you keep Sunday as the moral law in your church. I demand that you immediately, for the sake of the integrity of the Reformation, don't you dare claim your sola scriptura if you keep Sunday as your Sabbath. especially if you say it's a moral commandment that's been changed. You have no basis in scripture to do that. So I order you, by as God is my witness, to immediately stop using sola scriptura in your doctrine, because you're a hypocrite and you're false and you are undermining the integrity of the Reformation. So I demand all those that keep Sunday to immediately stop claiming your sola scriptura, or demonstrate from the text why you keep Sunday. And if you can't, then you have no business being a Protestant, because you accept tradition over scripture, and you had no business leaving your mother. Now run along. I know you have a lock of her hair in your pocket that you rub against your cheek every night. So just admit it.